on this Maundy Thursday, we enter what the church has called the Great 3 Days. So Thursday, Friday and Saturday, where we remember the suffering, the death, and at the end of Saturday, the resurrection of Jesus. And these are kind of not just the most important days in the history of the church, but arguably, well, certainly in my opinion, the most important 3 days in the history of the world. And today we remember the Last Supper of Jesus, when he got his disciples together and he gathered them and he told them to remember him with a meal. And they were remembering the Passover, which was the time in the Old Testament where God had saved his people from death and delivered his people, and they were remembering that message of freedom. And then Jesus took some bread, probably nothing like this bread, but Jesus took some bread and he broke it, and he gave thanks, and he said, and he gave this a new meaning. You know, it was full of symbolism already, the Passover meal, but Jesus gave this meal a new meaning. And it was still about freedom, but it was then focused on Jesus. And it says that Jesus, while they were eating, when he'd given thanks, he broke the bread and he gave it to his disciples and he said, "Take and eat, this is my body." And then he took a cup and he said, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." And ever since then, God's people, the followers of Jesus, have got together, taken bread, given thanks, shared it together, and eaten it. And one of the things that is incredibly painful at this time is that we can't do this together at the moment. We can't pass this from one to the other. We can't express our unity in God. We can't express the fact that we're brothers and sisters because of Jesus by doing this thing that he commanded us to do. We can't take this cup and pass it to each other and serve it to each other. And I've done this just now with real sadness in my heart, because I want to do this with everyone else. I want to be with my friends when we do this. And so today we remember that Last Supper that Jesus spent with his disciples. And it's a day of when we remember Jesus' suffering and how he relates to us in our suffering, that he suffered in all kinds of horrific ways. And when we're going through difficult times, Jesus knows, Jesus is with us, Jesus walks with us in those difficult times. And we remember the Last Supper. It's so poignant, you know, that the fact that we're isolated, but actually this is the thing that says we're together. And in all sorts of different ways, people are trying to express their togetherness, even though they're not allowed to be together physically. And we also remember Jesus when he knelt down in the Garden of Gethsemane, and it was this garden on the Mount of Olives, and he knelt down and he prayed this prayer: "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." This is Jesus we're talking about. His soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. This is the emotion that Jesus was feeling at the time. And he said to God, "Father, if it's possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." And it says that he was sorrowful and troubled. This is Jesus that went through this. Whatever you're going through right now, you might be grieving, you might be anxious and concerned, you might be sorrowful, you might feel at the point of death in that way. Jesus is with you today. Jesus is in that room that you're in now, and he loves you. He loves you. And it said Jesus was so desperate at that point that it looked like there was drops of blood, like sweat, coming from from his head, and so he kneels down in that garden, and he did that for all of us. He said, can this cup pass from me? Can I not go through with this? But actually, not my will, but yours be done. And he kind of submits himself to this great plan of salvation, which is for all of us. And so Jesus doesn't get a prayer answered then, in the way he says, if it's possible, can I not do this? But it was not possible. I don't know what you've been praying for or hoping for, and you're not getting it at the moment. And what Jesus does, he submits himself and he says, I will go through whatever this needs to be. And on this Maundy Thursday, churches traditionally kind of strip all the colour from their churches, and they sit in the darkness and the plainness, and remember that Jesus suffered for us, and we remember his arrest at this time. And so whatever you're going through, remember that Jesus understands, that Jesus is with you in the difficulties and in the heartache, that he knows what it is to suffer. And so we remember him today.